it to everybody who's going to sit in the witness chair. And then questions and answers if committee members have questions for you. So please, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. My name is Jeff Dahl. My first name is actually spelled Bristol. In the end, the PSB upheld the permit with the primary basis for upholding the permit that the alternative stormwater treatment system that was proposed for the project would be monitored. However, there's only 4 months left in the permit that will expire in August of 2016. And the monitoring for the alternate stormwater treatment systems has yet to begin. There's no data to show that these systems are functioning, and so the renewal of the permit, if issued in August of this year, would be done so without any foundation data. Specifically, condition 14 of the permit requires that a minimum of 1 year following the completion of construction, within 3 years of the completion of construction, that the experimental level spreaders and vegetated buffers are to be monitored with data collected to determine if they meet the performance standards of the Vermont Stormwater Management Standards. Green Mountain Power further committed in their initial application that they'd monitor for 3 years continually. Well, to date, in over 2.5 years following the minimum start date for monitoring, nothing's been done. It's my conclusion that GMP cannot show that these systems will work. And these very same systems are proposed for Deerfield, which has already been permitted. While there is water quality monitoring being conducted thousands of feet downstream, this is not a surrogate for the testing that's required under condition 14. That monitoring is done for the water quality certificate. So right now, there's no data to confirm or refute the protection of water resources in the regulated waters in the higher elevations. So based on my review of the record at the Agency of Natural Resources, I offer the further following concerns on wind and solar projects. The level spreaders and the associated vegetated buffers for high elevation energy projects are not functioning effectively on their own and require significant maintenance and upkeep that are failing. Deerfield Wind in southern Vermont is proposing to use the same exact type of approach for stormwater management. They've already been issued their permit. Yet there's no data that's been produced from Lowell to support that these systems will work at Deerfield. If these systems are found not to protect water quality, you'll not just have one large mammoth project, you're going to have 2. And of course, there's other projects in the works, as I'm sure you're well aware. The stormwater permitting program, one of the issues on the appeal process is that the stormwater permitting program does not promote public input until the draft permit is issued by A&R, well after the developer and A&R have negotiated the final plan. By the time the draft permit is issued for review, the public can do little to affect the outcome of the project. This process then leads to the need to appeal the permit in an attempt to get a seat at the table to comment. The appeal process itself for a stormwater permit for renewable energy projects is unaffordable by the agreed. For example, the Lowell Kingdom Community Wind Project cost Energize Vermont nearly $400,000, including attorneys and experts. And appealed by the Public Service Board of A&R, permitted energy projects put the appellant at a disadvantage, as A&R, a defendant in the appeal, is usually the Public Service Board's expert on environmental matters. So you can see the conundrum that they may be in. There is also a misconception about the impact of solar projects on the landscape. Construction is significant and is not simply an impact by the poles of the solar panels on the ground. And as I understand, A&R permits solar arrays in wetlands. The effect of soil compaction and shading is not conducive to a healthy remaining wetland. The renewable energy program in Vermont does not apparently have incentives to promote the installation of projects on the already built landscape. For example, in New Jersey, my home state, for solar projects built on active agricultural land, you do not receive renewable energy credit. Instead, they'd like to push these projects toward already developed land, such as landfills, parking lots, brownfields, and other existing infrastructure. So Vermont, in the push toward meeting the renewable energy goals, should do the same to preserve its agricultural wetlands and forest lands. Ironically, renewable energy projects in Vermont are not designed with climate change in mind, and as a result, the stormwater systems currently designed will likely not meet the needs of increased expected flooding in the years ahead. In closing, as I've observed, Vermont is no closer to balancing its renewable energy needs with adaptation to climate change and the preservation of natural resources for future generations than it was 4 years ago when I first testified. This committee and legislature must commit to finding that balance. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Okay. Questions?
Jeff, this is Bob Krebs. So, am I understanding you right to saying that Green Mountain Power is out of compliance right now?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. The existing standards for stormwater high elevation, are they inadequate then? Is that what you're saying? The standards aren't?
Well, there's two parts. What I'm first saying is that right now, Green Mountain Power is not monitoring the systems as required by the permit condition 14 of their permit. Because these are alternate stormwater treatment systems, in other words, they're not proven technology, they have yet to provide data to show that these systems will work and actually reduce, for example, total suspended solids by 80% as per the stormwater rules. So that's the first part. So there's an administrative, A&R is not enforced the condition 14 specifically of the permit. Secondly, of the photographs I've seen of the inspections, which by the way, there are not very many photographs available. I actually did a public request, public records request and received all the data up until the beginning of February. The level spreaders are still full of turbid water. There's issues with iron seeps. There's issues with the level spreaders not actually discharging the water level. So there are still ongoing issues associated with these projects. So that would be the second part. I think physically these systems are very difficult, especially in high elevations where you have severe weather. It's probably very difficult to maintain these systems. It would be difficult to maintain septic treatment practices, let alone some of these alternate treatment practices.
Last question, at least for me anyway. Are there some studies that solar arrays are not conducive to healthy wetlands that you could share with us?
There's actually a paper that was written. Actually, it was a paper that was conducted in a study by the University of Maryland. They studied, and I believe it was submitted to the American Society of Civil Engineers. And what it showed was they wanted to determine whether or not elevated panels would have a significant impact on stormwater runoff. What they found is that if all else is equal, in other words, you maintain that vegetation as it is before and after the solar panels are installed, stormwater increases like peak flow and volume increases are very little, and they're almost unaffected. However, once you start losing vegetation, then all bets are off. Essentially, you get peak flow increases, significant peak flow increases, and you also get significant volume discharge increases. That leads to erosion and other issues of water quality degradation. Now, I personally have been involved in the design and construction of several solar projects in New Jersey, as well as, I understand the construction methodology associated with these projects. So there was a 10 megawatt project that I worked with in New Jersey. What they do, when you build a solar complex, you go in with these, first of all, you clear all the vegetation, you ride over it with equipment, that compacts the soil. You then go in with skid steers and these equipment to drive the piles into the ground. So there's repetitive compaction. So, and a lot of times you'll then come in to make the ground stable. They'll either have to compact it or they'll have to provide, put gravel in to get into these areas, which significantly alters the soil. Not only wetlands, but it's even, for example, in agricultural land. What I'm saying is a solar project is like any other construction project. just because it's renewable energy, it still has to use traditional construction equipment to get built. And so you could have a 50 acres, if there's a 50-acre area of an array of panels, that entire 50-acre area gets disturbed and gets compacted.
Okay.
You can try to go in afterwards and do rototilling and try to restore the soil, but the problem is you've got the panels you can't get under, and you also have underground conduit and wiring that you would end up digging up as well. So it does permanently alter the hydrology of a wetland and the soil type and the soil that's underneath the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I thank you, Mr. Gall, for your time, informative, and that I think will do it for today. Maybe we'll talk to you soon again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yep, bye.
Take care. Bye.
Now, did I do that for? Frank?
I may not be able to do this. I understood that there would be a screen. I have the files here.
It's behind you.
Okay. All right, so I can do it.
Hey, Shannon's got this covered.
Okay, she's gonna have to help me though. I'm a Linux person, this is Apple. I'm not way
Oh. S,
Yeah.
uppercase.
No, no, it's okay.
This chair, David.
And the password,
That's a member's chair. I'd
uppercase.
rather not give that up. Can someone give up? Are there unused
Salmo,
folding chairs out in the hall?
S-A-L-M-O.
Grab hold of one. if
Maybe
you
the
will,
windowsill,
bring
the windowsill would work, David.
it. No? Oh, all right.
this,
Go to uppercase, right here. You got it, S-A-L-M-O.
yeah, you have to change it. This is Steve. Okay, this is, bigger, I guess. The reason I'm here today is that about 4 years ago, an out-of-town landowner in Wyndham that owns about 3,000 acres of land in Wyndham and 2,000 in Grafton approached Iberdrola, a Spanish industrial wind developer, and invited them to come to Wyndham and build the largest proposed wind installation in Vermont. This is, as you can see, Wyndham and Grafton, and if you don't know where we are, lots of you guys are from up north. This is the outline. You can see the little red dot here, and that's us down at the bottom of the screen. This picture on the left is the counties or the towns in Vermont drawn relative to their population. You can see a little line I've drawn over to a little freckle, gray freckle in the middle. That's us down in Wyndham. This over here, I can make this bigger, I don't know how. Is that it?
No.
How do you do it? How do you make it bigger, Shannon? Help? I don't know what to do. How about you? Do you know?
It's big up here.
Oh, it's big up there? All right, so this is a digital elevation model that shows the terrain of the area. I've drawn lines showing where Wyndham and Grafton is. The picture down below here is just that same model. That's looking, by the way, from south to north. This big mountain over here is Glebe Mountain. This area here is where they propose to build a wind installation. That's about 1,300 feet and 5 miles away, 1,300 feet higher in elevation and 5 miles west of Grafton. This is the same model turned up on its edge just so that you can see the terrain profile. This is the same thing, and on this one I've added the streams, and you can see the blue lines here just to show that there's lots of water on that. And this place here that's outlined in red, this is the site where they're proposing to put 28 wind turbines. And the reason I'm showing you this is because this next image, I've taken off all of the streams except the Saxton's River. The North Fork is shown in yellow, the South Fork is shown in red, and you can see that the South Fork, almost all of those streams originate right exactly where they're proposing to build the wind installation. And the important thing to notice here is that both of those forks converge in downtown Grafton, and Grafton has a history of flooding. It floods about every 7 years. The last time it flooded was 2012, and it cost about $5.1 million, I'm told. Probably more than that. I don't know how you would exactly calculate that. This image here is just showing where these cyan-colored dots show where the turbines would be placed. And the thing to notice about that is no turbine site on there is not assault at least one stream. In most of the cases, that water runs off into 2 streams and sometimes 3. And this picture here is just a straight down view. This is Wyndham over here, the red dot, Grafton over here. This happens to be the Velco transmission line. And that's what actually makes this site attractive to the wind developer. A single landowner, proximity to a transmission site, and that's about it. The wind there appears to be pretty poor, and they seem to be having trouble coming to grips with getting the right units. Speaking about water in this committee is pretty appropriate, and I now have another set of concerns. There's lots of others, but I'm just going to confine myself to water and wildlife. Most everyone knows what this is. This is a beech tree, of which there's plenty on this site here. And this is called sometimes a bear nest. They don't actually nest in it, but they climb up on the trees and eat the beech nuts. So about last Wednesday, a friend of mine who's here behind me, who happens to be a professional photographer, and I, we got our GPS and cameras and set out from my house to up here to walk across my wetland and beaver installation, and we crossed over onto the Stiles Brook track to Meadows End. Here we started mapping these bear nest trees. Our criterion was simple. If it had one of those big nests in it and it had claw marks on the trees, we marked it with a waypoint on our GPS. And we just started walking and mapping what we saw as we saw it. It turns out I did have some familiarity with this area, and I know that there's vernal pools up here. All of these magenta-colored balloons here are these bear nest trees. This here is a pretty large wetland with a pool, which I had not known about before, so I just marked it. This area right here, judging from the amount of moose poop on the ground, looked like an overwintering spot for moose. And then this is another very dense area here of these bear nest trees. And this image here shows these yellow push pins are where the proposed wind turbines would be, right along this ridge. The reason there's not any bear nests in here, this area is all evergreens. You can very easily identify where the hardwoods will be by looking at Google Earth. This imagery for this was taken, I think, in 2014, so it's fairly recent. But it appears it was taken in early, I think in August is when it's dated. So if it's hardwoods, you can see the leaves are beginning to change. You go there and you'll find beech and more of these bear nests. Also, I'd just like to point out that the slopes on these mountains, this site, these are very steep. Lots of them are over 30%. And what limited in research I've been able to do, research by looking on the internet using Google, is I think Maine and the state of North Carolina say that these level spreaders that they would propose to use here are completely ineffective on slopes 30% or greater. I don't know that, but Mr. Gall does. So that's a hustle through my presentation.
Questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does your town have a town plan?
Our town does have a town plan, and our town specifically forbids the installation of industrial wind, and also specifically prohibits the use of level spreaders or experimental stormwater runoff. control measures.
Have you been following the bill on the Senate side for the siting bill? I think it's S 231?
230.
230?
Not with any intensity, no. If you could tell me something about it. Well,
It seeks to change the way that the Public Service Board considers town plans, and I was gonna ask if you've been following it, if you thought that was gonna help you, or, think it,
I don't know. I have no idea whether it will or not.
We'll keep that in mind when we take a look at it.
I have one last slide, which I can't get to, it seems. Oh, no, it's not a slide. Listening to what Mr. Gall just said, and our dire situation here in Vermont, in Wyndham, we would ask that if the legislature has anything at all to do with it, when the new governor is elected, that you do everything you can to demand that a professional, trained environmentalist be picked to lead the Agency of Natural Resources. Thanks.
Frank, have you, or Shannon, has he been able to give you this presentation?
Yes, I sent it to you in email.
Okay, and I would like to post it on there. Other questions?
I've got a question.
Yeah, Paul.
What's the status of that project now?
Well, as of right now, there is no project because they have not entered the ISO New England queue. And they were on the queue as of October, about October 15th of 2015. They withdrew from the queue and assured us that that was just a procedural matter and that they would be re-entering the queue within weeks. They haven't done that, and they now tell us that they won't enter the queue until after the town of Wyndham and or Grafton votes to accept or welcome the project. I don't know exactly what that means. They have told us on election day, if a town, one of the two, if 50% plus one voter votes to oppose the project, they say that they will walk away. They do not have a very good record of doing what they say, but we would like to hold them to that. We think that actually no one in the town, maybe 5 people, actually wants wind turbines. What they do want is the money that would be paid out for it. But the wind turbines are pretty heavy baggage for a small amount of money.
No Met towers that have been erected?
They are. They are there. They were there for 3 years. At the time those were erected, they said that they would have all the data they needed and would be ready to begin in 6 months afterwards. 3 years later, they asked for an extension of that, saying that they needed more data. And then very shortly after that, they proposed a preliminary layout to people, implying to me that they did not use the data to arrive at that preliminary plan. So I think that they misled the Public Service Board at that point.
All right, thank you, Frank.
Thank you for
I
the
know it was a long
opportunity.
trip up here. Thanks. Peggy?
That's me.
Please.
Much late.
Yeah, I know, you sort of have to stroll down the way there.
Well, I thank you for giving me this time. I've sent what I'd like you to see electronically, and you have a paper copy in front of you, I believe.
Okay, and if you would, for the record, state your name and
Yes.
association, if any, and
I'm Peggy Barter, legally Mary Margaret. I'm a summer resident, 5 months of the year in Morgan, and have represent the town. I'm also very active in the Lake Association. Seymour Lake is in Morgan, and the town is the watershed for the lake. Virtually all the land in the town is in the watershed. In the first paragraph, I give my background so you can know a little bit more about me. But what I'd really like to do today is to communicate the confusion and the sense of being helpless that results in a community with the present Public Service Board process for siting renewable energy projects. I felt this firsthand when the town of Morgan asked for my participation in writing the town's intervention statement for an industrial solar project proposal for Valley Road in Morgan. I'm here to ask you to more deeply consider two factors when you work to improve the process for approval of renewable energy projects and their placement on the land. I will speak primarily about water quality of surface waters, but as you all know, the health of fisheries and wildlife depends upon good water quality in wetland streams and lakes. First, please create a more equitable method of determining the site for solar, wind, and wind projects to include the needs of the communities. I'm requesting legislation or directions to the PSB which require a renewable energy project developer to enter discussions with towns regarding their preferences for project sites before proposing a project to the PSB. One way to accomplish this could be to bring the process under Act 250 review. Second, please eliminate the practice which considers solar panels to be pervious surfaces, except for the posts. I've done a little research regarding treating solar panels as pervious. Google research, as someone else referred to earlier. I've learned that the effectiveness of stormwater infiltration into the soil depends on several factors: soil compaction, soil type, tilt of the slope, height of the vegetation beneath the panels, and severity of rainfall. The photos which follow illustrate what can happen when all factors are not favorable. And those are of Barton Solar. I'm going to ask you for a moment to flip to the very back of your packet. The back page shows a proposed solar installation close to Lake Memphremagog, which is considered by the EPA and the state to be an impaired water body. On the page before that are two more solar projects in close proximity to Lake Champlain. The project in Seymour is one page more back and is very close to Lake Seymour. So I don't feel this is an isolated incident that has happened in Morgan. And as you look through the pages, you can see there, you see a lot of bullets. The town and the Lake Association and people who use the lake have been quite proactive in attempting to protect the lake. So after the Barton photos, the industrial solar panel project in Morgan was submitted by Seymour Lake Solar LLC. The location chosen entirely by the developer is 2,112 feet upstream from the lake. It is located, and on the next map you can see in there, shows the location. It's bounded on one side, doesn't show so well on this map, but on the next one, it's located right in between two branches of the main tributary of the lake, which is Sucker Brook. It was a shock to us because Morgan's town plan states that renewable power projects should provide power to Morgan and states that they should be located away from Valley Road, Route 111, and the lake, which are all designated as scenic areas of town. The project further violates the town plan because it does not provide, will not, if it's accepted, provide an economic benefit to the town, and the developer reports that the net metered credits are destined to go to Jay Peak. We have met with both people from the town. The select board has met with Bill Stenger of Jay Peak and with Christine Halquist of VEC. They had been looking for sites located in Jay for renewable energy power for Jay Peak, according to their reports at our town meeting, at our select board meeting. I was even more shocked because I'm chair of the Lake Association's Water Quality Committee, that the land on which the proposed panels would be placed has mostly slow draining soils bounded on one downhill side by the largest tributary of the lake. Then I learned that these panels are defined as pervious, as pervious. I keep getting this, yeah, keep saying the wrong thing. The conventional definition, which we who live in the Seymour Lake watershed, not just the people on the lake, but all of us, we've learned through the work of the state about low-impact design practices and from the shoreline protection law of what a pervious surface is and what an impervious surface is. And you will see, my pages aren't exactly the same as yours, but some examples in the shoreline protection law handbook give examples of impervious surfaces, and they include decks, which are not a whole lot different than solar panels, and compacted, non-vegetated areas. So we're confounded that solar panels are treated as pervious. Don't want to take too much of your time. Our lake has a really small,
Relax.
okay,
Take a deep breath, relax.
I can read through it all, but I know you have a long day. Am I going too fast?
No, I don't believe
It's
so.
okay?
It's a little
Okay.
hard- It's hard to follow you in this, so if you can orient us back to this sometime.
Sure, okay. Our lake has a really small watershed in comparison to the size of the lake. It's, I believe, the second largest in acreage lake in the state. Our watershed is smaller than that of neighboring Echo Lake. I have the exact numbers in the text here. That means our lake turns over once every 4 years. I guess the point being here is that it's not the same in all bodies of water, and the rules seem to treat it all the same, although I don't really recommend building that close to any body of water, and I don't think any of the conventional knowledge states to do that. We're particularly concerned in our case because this brook already contributes a lot of silt to the lake, right where the public access is. The Fish and Wildlife public access, and it's starting to reduce the ability of people, the public who own the water, to put their boats in and out of the lake. We have addressed, and we are addressing other ways the silt is coming down the brook. Several of them are agricultural in nature, and the Road Commission in Morgan and the farmers have taken actions, and there are big efforts, funded efforts by federal grant money through the Memphremagog Watershed Association in our part of the state to work further with farmers. They've had a hard road to hoe to protect these little streams that are vital parts of their livelihood also. So the problems with this site could have been avoided if there'd been some collaboration. The town plan, we've been told it's a good one, probably could be better, probably most things in this world could be better, but the town made an honest effort to protect its natural resources, and the huge resources, the lake and the scenery, of course, and the wildlife that the lake enables us to have. I can answer further questions, I can say more.
Well, let me see, questions?
Sort of a comment, Peggy, which would go to everybody that's in the room. This is my own opinion. Sort of what we do
Yes.
here is we say, take care of the water, we need water quality. We sort of do these policy things, And then what often happens is it goes to a state agency and they develop standards through the rulemaking process or something. So there's two things that are going on right now that I know of. One is the whole stormwater manual on all these treatment methods is being rewritten. And they need to hear from people like you that if you feel that level spreaders don't work, or if you feel something else isn't, that's your chance for really meaningful public input.
Should I?
Well, if you go to
communicate
their
with you by-
A&R website and, you know, look up stormwater rules.
Okay,
Excuse me, did we post the stormwater draft on our website?
Yes, we linked to it.
Okay, so it is linked
Okay.
on our website, and this is what the critter looks like, but, it,
Okay.
you know,
manual.
yeah.
This is where everybody would have a much better chance of some really meaningful public input, because those are gonna be the standards. So if those are the standards, and somebody hires so-and-so to do something, and they go to that manual and say, okay, this is what I'm gonna do, so. And the same thing would apply, because I think you mentioned agriculture a little bit.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
rewriting their rules
Yeah.
right now, the accepted agriculture practice. Same thing, there needs to be strong public input for that, so that people will understand what this is going on. Because we're sort of, protect the water, we might give you some citing criteria for some of these things like that, but very often the details get distilled down to this rulemaking process. And unfortunately, in my opinion, it's not quite as public as it should be, because you gotta dig to find the stuff very often, unless you're a full-time advocate, and it's very hard to do that. So I'm gonna encourage you to do that, and there's plenty of people here, I think, that have the expertise, and that's where you can, I think, even make more of a
Okay.
difference.
And the required agricultural practices are also, you can find them on this committee's
Through your
website.
committee website. I am very active in both the Memphremagog Watershed Association and in the Federation of Vermont Lakes and Ponds, and I will.
And they should be able to, the state personnel supporting the Lake
Yeah.
Association would be able to help you also.
Yeah.
And comments are due April 15th, so you're a month out for having to help shape
Office homework.
the implementation of public policy.
April 18th?
15th.
Tax day. Brother's
Yeah,
birthday.
and they're typically, they're required, they have what they call a responsiveness summary.
Yes,
So you make this comment, they're obligated to respond to you, but some of us look over their shoulder and say, did you answer that question? And if you
Okay.
didn't, why didn't you?
okay.
But it's that important. That's sort of the one buffer, if you will, between what we do in the legislature and what the administration does, so that people like you get heard.
Okay. Does, part of our frustration has been that this was filed, all the paperwork went back and forth between the town and the Public Service Board back in September. And this has not been acted upon yet, which I gather is a little unusual. But it seems that up until then, that process has not been helpful. So I'd just like you to know that my comments are partly to ask your help in any way you can give it to make that process more sensitive to the needs of towns and to the needs of the other.
Now, I would reference the comments that Representative Sheldon made earlier, or questions that she put forward about S-230.
Yes.
It was a bill that was introduced to address that very concern about responsiveness from the Public Service Board. Now notice, it has an S in front of it,
So
which
it's
means
not
that the
yet.
House has not yet, I don't believe it's passed yet. And so the House has not yet had a chance to weigh in and make our concerns known, but it would be helpful to hear from observers and participants what that bill does or does not do, in your opinion. And,
That's helpful, that's all.
yeah, and you've got our email addresses, so, or
You've probably
John
all
does.
heard from me back when the shoreline protection law was being formulated.
Yeah,
That was a start.
I'm sorry, you're not, you don't quite make it out of the
Oh,
chair
okay.
yet. Another question.
Oh, great.
Yeah, well, Becky, not so much a question, but because for me, repetition is good. I'm not sure everybody heard because the room, and there was a stormwater manual revision. Okay, I want to click on the stormwater manual, I like to click on the revision one, because, yeah,
Revised.
revision,
Yeah.
which is in process, with last comment April 15th, yes.
And that applies also to the stormwater, the agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.
Great.
Sally?
Yeah, here, I've got some copies for you. Sorry, I
Okay.
should have been distributing those earlier.
No.
I sent them to Shannon.
Well, thank you.
I've got a few more copies, Shannon, but I'm gonna, I forgot to bring my nice poster board, so I'm gonna take one of your copies so I can refer to it for now, and then I'll hand everything over.
So if you would, state your name, any association, if you have a brief opening statement, we would love to hear it, and then questions and answers.
Well, my name is Sally Colopy. I live in Fairfield. I'm part of the opposed Swanton Wind project and the whole statewide coalition for energy transformation. So my husband Bruce and I, thank you for inviting us. We really appreciate the hour today, and hopefully we can fit everyone in. But my husband Bruce and I live on Fairfield Pond in Fairfield, and we've been running the Lake Association for 16 years there. And as you well know, water quality is a serious issue in Vermont that we've spent millions of dollars on. We've worked very hard. Fairfield Pond has had a high phosphorus count for many years, in the high 20s. And we worked very hard through education and had reduced our numbers to like 14, 15. And it had been stable for a few years until the Shoreline Protection Act was put in place, and that was an act that we constantly followed up with, and like Peggy, have been involved in all kinds of grant things and everything that she's done too, the VIP, the lay monitor, all that stuff. But, you know, and it's great that the SPA, I'll kind of refer to it as the SPA now, was put in place, but I think the fear of the SPA caused much clear cutting around the state. And that was kind of confirmed through many lake and pond associations, including Fairfield Pond. I don't have pictures of that. I would have had it on my nice poster board. But we believe that this gutting caused a direct spike in phosphorus back to 21 or 23 for these last few years. And as you know, I mean, it takes years to recover from that. So imagine our concern when we heard about the proposed industrial wind turbines to be placed on Rocky Ridge and Swanton above Fairfield Pond. So for 26 years, I also worked with Vermont Local Roads, and in this capacity and through the Lake Association, we preached the Bible of the EPA, the ANR, and the DEC, and we didn't always agree with their decisions, but respected that the state cared so much about our environment. So imagine our shock thinking that this amazing habitat would be gutted and filled with stone, concrete, and highway-sized roads. And if you look at the pictures right now on this presentation, that's what the top of Rocky Ridge looks like now. It has amazing wetlands and vernal pools and peat bogs and all great carbon storing properties. And then you turn to the next page and, you know, there's Lowell. And you'll see, you know, the pictures of Fairfield Pond. And I also track all the water quality because we are farmers too, and plus we run the Lake Association and we measure the rain, and we all know that we're getting deluges more than gentle rainstorms. So, anyway, so, you know, we were shocked when we heard that, you know, that amazing habitat might be gutted. And that habitat is considered one of the highest, is the highest value habitat block in the Northwest region. And it's reported by the proposed developer that 95% of the stormwater runoff from this proposed project would drain into St. Albans and Missisquoi Bay area. The highest priority for cleanup with a goal of 65% reduction in TMDL. And that remaining 5% would go into Fairfield Pond. So you can imagine the comments that I've received from residents around the pond. It's kind of like, how can you ask people to respect the SPA and the 250 protected shoreline area from the water on their property, and then clear cut the ridge directly above the pond? I can't repeat the comments that I've heard. But needless to say, the SPA will become a completely meaningless law on Fairfield Pond, I regret to inform you. And anywhere else, we believe, around the state where industrial scale projects are proposed around our lakes and ponds. And this ridge is rich with beaver ponds, as I said, wetlands, vernal pools, peat bogs. So the mere thought of removing this habitat contradicts, in my opinion, and from my 30-year career with federal and state government, everything that the very agencies that are created to protect it stand for. The EPA stresses that impervious surface account for 14% of the lake's phosphorus loads and are linked to toxic algae blooms and aquatic habitat degradation. And we've had this on Fairfield Pond only in the last few years. I mean, you know, stormwater runoff comes from large areas, and, you know, can I say there's a direct correlation to the clear cutting that took place? Not really, you know, but there was silt running off in the pond, and, you know, we saw it, and I know that it contributed greatly. So the DEC outlines this type of development as stressors under their surface water management strategies. They talk about encroachment and channel erosion, all these things that are being created from ridgeline destruction. And they're saying that you almost never recover from them, 25+ year recovery time, and the impacts are very costly. So, and then the EPA, you know, I've gone to all the meetings, said in their news release and announced their public meetings last summer, that the greatest threat to healthy Lake Champlain is phosphorus pollution caused by stormwater runoff, non-point source pollution, and erosion. And they go on, they talk about, you know, the consequences of excess phosphorus and recreational use. It's an amazing habitat there that Ken will be talking about next. I mean, I can't tell you the habitat that exists on Fairfield Pond and up on that ridge line. I feel a little bummed that it's being outed so much because it was our private little paradise, and now it's like all over the place of how amazing it is. So anyway, you know, I think we all agree what phosphorus does to is doing to our water bodies. And, you know, how can we trust the developer, the utility, and A&R to enforce their permit conditions? As Jeff Gall, you know, outlined what's happening at GMP's Lowell Kingdom Community Wind. You know, the system is broken and stacked against homeowners, municipalities, and people who do care about our environment. And for years, we don't feel that that has been our environmental agencies. And Fairfield Pond is rich with nature. I'll let Ken, you know, get into that. But in my opinion, I think it's imperative that we stay the development on industrial wind in Vermont, pending a thorough, systematic study of the stormwater systems at Lowell, Sheffield, and Georgia Mountain, and all environmental consequences based on such factors as topography, geology, and other impacts to watersheds and our precious aquatic resources. And we can't compromise the long-fought gains that we've been fighting for so many years and continuing to fight to improve Lake Champlain. And, you know, mountaintop removal is only going to exacerbate a serious environmental problem that we already have existing. And in the Swanton Wind case, 95% of that is going into the main priority area for cleanup, the St. Albans Bay and the Missisquoi Bay. So, thank you very much. Some other little things that came up when you said something about a Met Tower. On Swanton Wind, we had an illegal Met Tower up for 3 years. and regarding your Public Service Board person, the POA position. I think it's a great salary that they're offering, the $100,000 salary. I don't think it's gonna do what needs to be done. If that person cannot provide legal advice to municipalities or residents who come in to fight their case in the Public Service Board process, I don't see it as being an effective position. I'm sorry. I think that position needs to be legal counsel that is represented. So, thank you very much.
Question?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ken?
Thank you. I suppose. My name is Ken Fox. I live on Fairfield Pond, at the southern end of the pond near the swamp. I've been there for, I don't know, decades. Let's say since the Beatles were still producing records. It's been a long time. And in my experience of living out there, I'm kind of a nature boy myself, so I look at what's around me. So I see a lot of deer. I saw 8 before I left in the backyard today. The geese are back. But what I wanted to talk to you about in terms of wildlife was my concerns for when I heard about this project being, well, developed by Swan Wind for these towers, that I believe, you know, in my experience of being out there all that time, it seems as though there's kind of flight patterns that exist for birds that come to the pond, and they're primarily geese. As you'll see in that survey, we've observed plenty of other birds too, but it is primarily geese. And my feeling was that when they leave the pond, you know, a lot of them seem to come from the main flyway on Lake Champlain. So they come over there to either stay in the pond or feed around the pond, and when they leave, they go exactly where those towers are being proposed. That was my guess. So I decided with myself and some associates that we would do our own personal survey, other than the one that the developer did. The developer's survey was concluded in the middle of September. And we felt that a survey that was going to observe flight patterns of bird activity to end in the middle of September this particular year wouldn't show much wildlife, because most of the activity occurs later than that. So what we did was we ran our survey from September 21st to December 21st. We ran it at 7 locations on Fairfield Pond and 1 location at Rocky Ridge. And my associates and I were there, not every day, but it was more than every other day. It was a majority of days that were there. And our observations only confirmed what it seemed I expected, was that all the flight activity, when they left the pond, sometimes there'd be a back and forth with some of the wetlands that go over toward Route 36. But when it was time for birds to take off from that general area, they weren't going over Bellevue Hill where the radar towers are in St. Albans. Everyone that I observed went directly where these towers are being proposed. And at that point, most of them weren't very high up in the air. And these towers being at 499 feet, I'd say, you know, I don't know whether they're flying into those or not. But let's say if they're that tall and these birds are flying at a low level, it might be impacted. So the conclusion of our study was that basically this project would be incompatible with wildlife on Fairfield Pond. And what you're looking at there is pictures and observations that were taken by myself and my 2 associates. And it was, like I say, just about every day we could find. We tried to keep the survey such that we weren't both reporting the same thing. We reported our numbers extra low because we didn't want to be exaggerating. You'll see also that we would study this multiple times during the day, so it might turn out there were geese there at one point, then at another point, there was nothing there. So it seemed unlikely that we were repeating seeing the same birds over and over. And when the whole thing was done, and what you're seeing there is the first part of that with the pictures, that's my diary. The second part, that one-page part, is a part that was done by Nancy Dunn for the first month of the survey, when I wasn't there that much. And then the other part was done by Mary Ann Duell from the other side of the mountain, or from the other side of Rocky Ridge, and around Rocky Ridge. And when I finally, added this all up to see how many birds we'd actually seen, I waited until I had this whole thing done. And like I say, I tried to keep all the numbers on the low side. I kept cutting them down. I didn't want to exaggerate. And the bottom line is that between the three of us, during that period of time, we observed over 6,000 birds. I don't know whether that's a high or low number. It seems significant to me. And that's why we felt that this survey ought to be submitted for your consideration. And also, this has been submitted to the Agency of Natural Resources, to their attorney, to Billy Coster. That was done yesterday. And I don't know, I think that's pretty much what I have to personally say. And the only other thing I'd like to offer this committee is some commentary, for lack of a better word, from those who you are mandated to protect in all of this, and that's the wildlife out there. So if you would permit me, for 3 minutes, I would like to play a recording that was made at Fairfield Pond this past summer in July, and what you will hear is a recording made at 2:30 in the morning at Fairfield Pond. And what you will hear on this recording, you will hear, well, you'll hear insects, you'll probably hear a little wind, then it sounds like people talking, except that's going to turn out to be the amphibian part of this, frogs. Then if you listen carefully, it's going to sort of sound a little more like people. That will be owls. And then for the grand finale, you will hear the loon. So, if I may, hopefully this thing will function. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you for your consideration.
How will we know that speaker works if you need it?
I was looking at yours. Yours is better than mine. But let's see. Okay. No, there'd be no music. Well, I shouldn't say that.
No, you could provide it, he said.
How depressing. How depressing.
Technology.
After all that, and it did work at home, of course, it's not going to work. I'm not
Yeah.
getting
Is it
anything. I
CD?
don't understand. Oh, of course. Old
Anybody-
tech.
Shannon could play it.
You got a CD in
You
your,
have a speaker?
I'll try one more time.
you got a CD?
You
over
do?
there? Yeah.
Let's do it that way. Now I know why I was nervous. This should only take about 3 minutes. A little relaxation tape at the end of a long day. And you can turn that up as loud as that'll go. Don't worry, it won't be that loud. Oh, there it was. You can turn the volume all the way up to 10. Go for it. that's as loud as it's gonna get. You hear the loon about 3 times. You would be, you know, I could send you guys a copy of this if you want to really hear it, but I just wanted to present that as, you know, the affected parties for all these years, and it failed. But in any case, like I say, there's owls on there, the loons are on there, and that's what, you know, you will probably find that if these towers go up, oh, let's say 5 seconds out of every minute for the rest of your life, as long as they spin, you'll be hearing the rumbling of a refrigerator type sound.
All right, questions?
Ken, is there public access to Fairfield Pond?
Yes, there is.
Uh-huh.
There's a public access beach. My understanding from Stantec, which did the bird survey and does them for the state, was that they had considered doing that out there, but they didn't feel it was, you know, close enough to the ridge, because that beach is at the opposite end of the pond from where I am, and from where I am, it's about a half a mile over the ridge. So they did their survey on the other side of the ridge, but their survey was concluded, you know, by the middle of October. When I saw them for the first time, because I tried to visit them every day they were doing their survey, that was in the end of September, and by the end of September, they'd already done 5 out of their 10 surveys.
And how about boats? Public, is that a spot to launch a boat as well then, or just?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you look on page, it's probably about page 3, I gave you a map of Fairfield Pond. It might indicate me as to where I'm kind of located. This is where the beach is.
Okay.
That's where the towers are, and they decided
Okay.
that wasn't going to work for them.
Okay.
But we just didn't feel that their survey was comprehensive enough under the conditions this year with all the warmth that took place, that most of the activity occurred after they were done. So we just felt that their survey, although it would be accurate, it wouldn't show that much activity. We just felt that 6,000 birds was a little more activity. Thank you.
So, Ken, Shakespeare said that in his work, the audience could do a much better job than he with their imagination. And so he didn't detail a lot of things and let the audience work at it. I don't want you to think you failed, because I heard all of those people. Thank you.
How true.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ken. Ed?
Yeah.
Rivka?
Yeah, think of the I as a, think of the Y as an I.
Aye.
My name is Ed Ribka. I live in New Haven. I'm here to tell you today a little bit about what's going on at the Agency of Natural Resources. Things that I don't think are very good, and I think that the government of Vermont should be aware of. Specifically, obviously, the developer had to get a certificate of public good from the Public Service Board. So we were permitted to intervene in the project. Now, I know you're probably thinking, okay, this is another classic NIMBY here. He doesn't want it in his backyard. Well, my original goal in that project was not necessarily to kill the project, but to get some landscaping around it. I thought what could be more reasonable than asking for some trees and bushes and other things. And I thought that the Public Service Board and the Department of Public Service would be very receptive to that. Boy, was I naive. That was the worst thing I could have ever done. What's happening is that A&R has identified numerous situations where there's bobolink habitat, but it really has not done anything about that. What it's been doing is that it's been negotiating deals with developers in private, out of public view, and the public is informed about the results only afterwards. Now, this whole proceeding started about last summer. Fish and Wildlife sent in one of their biologists to take a look at the site of the 20-acre solar array, and he found very significant bobolink habitat. Now, you'd think that would have been a major alarm, and that may have even killed the project. Now, as it turned out, it was the best thing that could have happened for the developer. The developer immediately contacted A&R, and secret negotiations began between the developer and the Agency of Natural Resources. The developer's attorney wrote some emails saying, hey, the developer's put a lot of money into this project. It's invested a lot of cost. We can't just, do anything. We can't just walk away from this project. It's significant that the A&R, the wildlife biologist came in and recommended significant mitigation measures, but those would have been far too expensive. Now, bobolinks are a species of concern. I'm not an expert on bobolinks. My understanding is that they're very, very shy of any kind of human or animal activity around them. They like to nest way out in the middle of open fields. The Agency of Natural Resources began secret negotiations with the developer, and the result was a memorandum of understanding. You've got that in the packet of materials that I've handed out. That was entered into on September 24th. What A&R did is that it completely rejected the recommendations of its own wildlife biologist. What it recommended is something that it's done in other projects too. It recommended delayed mowing practices on the area that's going to be around the project, but it didn't forbid the project at all. Also, what it's done sometimes didn't specifically do that here, but sometimes they require developers to pay into some kind of a fund to educate farmers about bobolink habitat and the benefits of delayed mowing. So this memorandum of understanding, unfortunately, did not stop the project or protect the bobolink habitat, but actually what A&R did is they went one step beyond that. They said that the entire area around the project had to maintain a 50-foot buffer zone, and that was to protect the bobolinks. So there's a map that's in your packet. I wish I had known about PowerPoint. I could have perhaps thrown it up on the screen for the benefit of all these great people. But you have the 20-acre solar array in the middle, and then that entire area is surrounded by their 50-foot buffer zone, which is supposed to protect bobolinks. Now, when the town of New Haven and the other neighboring landowners intervened in the project, one of their goals was to get landscaping planted around the project. This project is very near Field Days, which is where we have our annual fair that's attended by tens of thousands of people. And we didn't want people staring into 20 acres of metal and glass. So the town of New Haven in particular wanted to plant a row of trees, or require the developer to plant a row of trees around the project. A&R came out and said, no, you can't do that, because those trees are going to interfere with bobolink habitat. At that point, this is true, the Department of Public Service then came in. The Department of Public Service had also entered into secret negotiations with the developer. These were all done behind closed doors. We found out about it in November when another memorandum of understanding was entered into with the Department of Public Service. The Department of Public Service came out and said, we are not going to allow landscaping either. And that was significant because the department had hired its own aesthetics expert to evaluate the aesthetic impact of the project. That woman, Jean Vissering, had recommended landscaping around the project. She also recommended a post-construction site visit, saying that after the project is constructed, we should go out there, take a look, and see exactly how this project looks, because it's very difficult to assess the impact before it's built. And at that point, additional landscaping could be done. The Department of Public Service, who hired this expert, then rejected all of her conclusions, saying, no, we can't do that, because the A&R MOU that was entered into forbids the planting of any landscaping around that project. So think about this for a second. We cannot plant a single tree around that project because that interferes with bobolink habitat. But a 20-acre solar array does not. That's considered perfectly acceptable. And when you think about this whole 50-foot buffer, it makes no sense whatsoever. A 50-foot buffer means that bobolinks will never be more than 25 feet from a source of disturbance. You've got a source of disturbance, first of all, in the solar array itself. That array is going to be constructed. It's going to be moving because the panels are on rotating axes, and those axes will produce noise. That was one of the issues that was brought up in the intervention that we did. Also, there's going to be maintenance of that solar array. I live next door to a 1-acre solar array, and there are people out there almost every day doing one thing or another. In addition to that, you've got an area that's frequented by foxes. There are coyotes, there are weasels, there are even feral cats, there are bird-raptors. These animals can hear the sound of rustling bobolinks over a distance of only 25 feet. Sound travels very, very quickly in these meadows. The result is that these predators are either going to eat all those bobolinks, or what is more likely, those bobolinks aren't going to nest there at all. There is no way that this 50-foot buffer zone is going to do anything for the bobolinks. But it's a huge bonanza for the developer, because now the developer does not have to plant a single tree around the entire array. It's been completely relieved of that responsibility. So what happened here? I know you're all as puzzled as I am. I mean, what happened to our government officials? Were they bullied? Were they duped? Were they out and out bribed? Nobody knows, because all of these negotiations were conducted behind closed doors and in secrecy. We never found out anything about it. As a matter of fact, at the hearing, which was last January, I wanted to call the Department of Public Service's attorney who signed the memorandum of understanding as a witness to ask how this memorandum was entered into. The reaction was amazing. The department immediately circled the wagons, saying, no, 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 we can't permit her to testify. She's an attorney. There's attorney-client privilege here. There are all kinds of issues of confidentiality. They would not allow her to testify. I asked a single question. I said, did you even consider all of the testimony that the interveners put in this proceeding before you entered into that memorandum of understanding? They refused to answer the question. They wouldn't even do that. And the thing that's also very alarming is that these memos were entered into halfway through the proceedings. The interveners were getting together all their experts. There were a lot of issues regarding system reliability, whether or not the electrical system could stand that 2.2 megawatt project. Experts were preparing reports. Halfway through the project, halfway through the proceeding, these memorandums were entered into, and the department completely disregarded all the evidence that was going to be coming in afterwards, including the evidence at the January proceeding. So I'm here basically to ask the committee to see what they could do. I don't know if the committee has the power to kill the project, which I would like to see. As I said, originally, my goal was to try to get some landscaping. But now that seems completely impossible, so I have no choice but to try to kill the project too, and that's what I've been doing as well. And that's what's going to be happening with a lot of these solar projects in Vermont. You're not giving people options. You're not allowing them to do anything. There seems to be no middle ground. It's like you either build the project or you kill the project. And a lot of people now are going to be trying to kill those projects. What I would like the committee to do, if it can do that, is to write a letter to the Public Service Board, because it has not yet rendered a decision in this proceeding, and just asking them not to approve the memorandum of understanding that was entered with the Department of Public Service and also with the Agency of Natural Resources. Both of those memos are subject to board approval. But I would like to see those two things completely renegotiated, and this time done in a public forum where the neighboring landowners and also the town of New Haven could add its input to the process. Thank you.
Questions? My instinct is to, in fact, get the Public Service Board over here, but since this is an active case, they will not come. And that is appropriate. It is being adjudicated, and it is not the legislature's business to intervene in those kinds of situations. So in answer to your major ask, no, the legislature cannot simply stop this project. That is, as Representative Krebs said earlier, we're in the business of public policy. And the administration then implements, and bodies that we give adjudicatory powers to then weigh the equities. And we would get our hands slapped, to put it mildly, if we were to try and intervene in those kinds of situations. Whether or not the public policy is correct is something we can look at, but you're not going to see an immediate response from that. And so just in terms of sort of a response to your questions to us. Yeah, the MOUs are, the Department of Public Service certainly can come and talk with us, and I would suggest to you that they will. Certainly can come and talk with us, and I would suggest to you that they will. Other questions, comments, Bob?
Well, if we're gonna ask some people to join us, I would certainly like to hear from Fish and Wildlife, because it seems a little contrary to what we did on the floor today. And we're trying to protect this stuff, and there's always two sides to the story, but hearing that something's not protecting
Right.
habitat or whatever.
Yep.
So I'd like to hear the other side of that.
Yeah, no, and I've already had, along with them, Green Mountain Power, A&R, and the Department of Public Service on my list, so.
Well, actually, I wanted to hear from the other side too, as a matter of fact, and when I submitted my brief in the proceeding, I expected the Agency of Natural Resources to respond because I put all these concerns in there, and I really, attacked that MOU. They never responded at all. They never even filed a brief. Department of Public Service filed one brief of a few pages, but they never addressed my concerns either. They never talked about the secret negotiations or this whole issue about bobolink habitat.
Do we have your stuff in here?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
that's-
all your
that's-
submittals as well, the submittals that you did get a response to, are they in here?
The brief, I didn't include a copy of my
Will
brief.
you get that
No.
to Shannon?
I
would you
could,
please?
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, send them to Jim. John, quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first would like to be present and offer the opportunity to testify on the day that DPS and A&R come. But
Yeah,
just
what I'm running up against is a meeting on budget, which will be the point of debate for the next 2 days in this body, started 10 minutes ago. So I want, if you will, those who have come to join us, who are not here all the time, to participate today, get us down to that meeting, which is where we should be.
But I could
You will be
inform the
invited.
committee
You will be invited.
about what's really, why this happens and why they feel compelled, both DPS and A&R, to enter into MOUs. They're in a very desperate set of straits, and it's because they do not have regulatory authority and any real say at the PSB. When I say they, mostly A&R. Okay, and I can explain to you in exquisite detail about how that works and doesn't
May
work.
very well become a matter of public policy, which we are interested in. So, yes, I would like to hear from you. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Steve?
Mr. Chair,
Right there, sir.
I'm prepared to come back if you want to get to your other responsibilities.
Yeah, if you,
Entirely up to you. I will quickly go through.
I think there are people in the room that would like to hear what you have to
Well,
say beyond the committee members. So
I hope so.
please.
My name is Steve Wright. I live in Craftsbury. I've been a resident of Craftsbury since 1968. When the U-Haul stopped and we all dumped everything out on the lawn. My professional background includes a Master of Science in Aquatic Ecology with additional grad study in Pacific salmon. I served as Fish and Wildlife Commissioner in the Cunin administration, did 7 years on the State Environmental Board, and finally finished my work life with 8 years as a climate change educator with the National Wildlife Federation in the northeastern part of the U.S. What can we Vermonters do about climate change? We're currently at odds about what climate change is, what climate change isn't, and what the proper response might be. I want to talk today with you briefly about Vermont's choices, opportunities for reducing statewide emissions, especially focused today on emissions, opportunities for preparing our landscape for the inevitability and irreversibility of climate change. I'm going to need to get right over here. Thank you. You can have my chair. This is today's quick seminar. I want to put 2 numbers up here. Anyone have any familiarity with those 2 numbers other than, other than you recognize them as 8 and a fraction? Wait, excuse me, I assume you, I'm operating with a certain number of assumptions here. I'm assuming you recognize that as 8.37 and 8.2, correct? Yes. Great. These are 2 of the most crucial data pieces that we have in our work to have the people of Vermont understand climate change and therefore make good choices about how to respond to climate change. 8.37 I'll spell something wrong in a minute. Both of these are in million metric tons. Anybody got a hint as to what's happening? This is from the Forest Parks and Recreation website on Forest Carbon. This is their calculation as to Vermont's, the entire state, not just state government, the entire state, of Vermont's annual carbon dioxide emissions at the latest date, which I think was 2014. Does that give anyone a hint as to what this number is?
Sequestration.
Exactly. And how did this happen? How did this figure, or this amount of this figure, get sequestered? In other words, or trapped, or put away, or captured. In other words, it's removed from the biotic system. Well, it's incorporated in the biotic system. That's a better word than removed. It happened because it occurred in a forested ecosystem. This is the amount of carbon that gets reduced annually by our forests. And I get some feeling from the body language and a few groans that one understands then the import of these numbers and how to apply these numbers in our decisions over dealing with climate change. What will Vermonters do about climate change? And the first choice is to understand and utilize the principle involved here, that a healthy landscape reduces CO2. A bunch of whirligigs make a lot of people rich. Now, there may be nothing wrong with rich these days. It gets a lot of coverage on TV these days by certain people. But reduction of carbon emissions, the purpose of that is to try to, as one of my friends said, bend the curve to some degree of climate change. One other number. Boy, I did lousy in arithmetic, but I'm having fun now. Check me if I get, see if I get this right. 2 10,000s. Correct? You mathematicians in the room? 2 10,000s. Anybody have any idea as to what that represents? This is the ratio of Vermont's annual emissions divided by global annual emissions. This is another component, or has to be a component of your decision-making structure if you're going to be using these figures. 2 10,000s. Is that clear? Do people understand what that fraction means? It means, if you want to get a quicker number and see this in current, sort of close